September the 13th, 2014 marks an iconic beginning for the first fully electric open-wheeled racing championship, Formula E. And boy, did it go off with a bang. Let's take a look back at some of the highlights from that famous first race in Beijing. The inaugural FIA Formula E race was staged in equally grand surroundings as Beijing's Olympic Park played host in September. As the teams and drivers lined up for the first event, no one could have foretold what was going to happen next.
Nico Prost was on pole position and held the lead on the way down into the first corner. Nick Heidfeld managed to go around the outside of Karun Chandok and move his Venturi car up into fourth position. Bruno Senna was also out of the race after contact on the opening lap, his front left wheel broken. Sebastian Buemi had looked quick all weekend, but was starting to struggle. The rear wing coming away from his Edam's car, and he would have to pit. The fans were enjoying the action as Nelson Piquet Jr. lost out to Takuma Sato as the Japanese driver climbed up the order in his Amlin Aguri car. Karun Chandok was also on a charge, overtaking Sam Bird into the final corner. After losing out to Chandok, Bird then came into the pits to complete his mandatory pit stop, jumping from one car to the other and heading back into the race. But all eyes were on the battle for the lead. Nico Prost had led from the start, but Nick Heidfeld was closing in on him as they came into the penultimate corner for the final time. Heidfeld was right up behind the Edam's car and launched an attack going into the final turn. Prost blocked. Heidfeld was sent into a huge accident. Luckily, both drivers were okay, but there was horror in both garages and there was fury for Nick Heidfeld. But it was the race victory for Lucas di Grassi. The man who had been running third going into the final corner had taken victory in the first ever FIA Formula E race in Beijing.
Well, the end of that race certainly wasn't for the faint-hearted. And to follow that epic Chinese opening, we headed to Putrajaya in Malaysia for round 2 and another spectacular street race.
Tension was building on the grid, and as the lights went out, it was a good start from Oriol Servia. Third place man Daniel Abt had a throttle problem, which meant he dropped right to the back of the pack. But up at the front, it was Servia, followed by Sam Bird. Catherine Legg took out Michaela Chiruti on the first lap, and then Matty Brabham went for a spin as well. But then the battle was on for the lead of the race. Sam Bird pressuring Oriol Servia, getting the cutback out of turn 3 and taking the lead of the race for the Virgin team down into turn 4. The team were delighted. And then Servia would lose out to Karun Chandok as he made his way past down into the first corner. The battles were continuing throughout the order. Bruno Senna had won the fan boost and tried to use it to get past Nelson Piquet Jr. But in the end, he ended up hitting the wall. He was able to continue though, and that problem would alleviate once he swapped his cars. But out in the lead of the race was Sam Bird, doing an excellent job. But then it was Nelson Piquet Jr. on the attack, first getting past Lucas di Grassi. He then tried the same manoeuvre a lap later, but was pushed into the wall by Jarno Trulli. Ultimately, it was a difficult end of the race for the Team China squad. The battle was on for the lead. Daniel Abt had to take a different strategy and as a result was running at much lower power. That allowed Sam Bird to get through into the lead of the race as Daniel Abt tried to maintain a strong finishing position. Senna then used his fan boost in his second car to make his way past Nico Prost going down into the first corner. The Edam's team a little disappointed, but not as disappointed as Senna, who on the final lap would smash into the wall and out of the race as Sam Bird took victory in the second round of the FIA Formula E Championship in Putrajaya. A wonderful performance, really showing strong battery management, and that moved him up to second in the championship.
Yes, come on, Sam. Sorry, enough of that. Now, from Southeast Asia to South America, it was Uruguay's beautifully picturesque Punta del Este that set the scene for round 3.
Verne qualified on pole in his Andretti car, but got too much wheel spin on the sandy side of the grid, allowing Nelson Piquet Jr. to move into the lead of the race. It was very busy in the middle of the pack as Antonio Garcia almost hit Karun Chandok in the Mahindra. But it was Nelson Piquet Jr. out in the lead of the race. Nick Heidfeld used his fan boost to make a move on Jaime Alguersuari, and Alguersuari was then under huge pressure from Lucas di Grassi. But the battle at the front raged as Verne closed in on Piquet Jr. Sam Bird retired from the race, the winner in Malaysia, shunting at the first chicane. But it was still nose to tail for first and second positions, with the Edam's cars close behind. Lucas di Grassi attacked Jaime Alguersuari, but had to skip across the runoff at the first corner. Verne was still pushing hard in second place.
Energy level.
6-9.
Verne then got a run on Piquet, moved to the inside line of the hairpin and took the lead of the race away from the Brazilian. Sebastian Buemi was pushing hard, a massive lock-up as he tried to move up into second place. Both he and Piquet Jr. had to cut across the runoff. Verne had used a lot of power, so he was the first man to come into the pits in his Andretti car. The race was soon over for Stefan Sarrazin. The Frenchman losing control of his Venturi. Bruno Senna got caught up in the incident as well, which brought out the safety car. Once the safety car came in, it was Sebastian Buemi leading the way for the Edams team. Nick Heidfeld was on a charge back up the order after he had to serve a drive-through penalty. Matty Brabham was the next man out of the race, losing it at the quick chicane. A really disappointing moment for the young driver.
Get packed up with Buemi.
Verne followed instructions and attacked Buemi for the lead of the race, forcing the Swiss over the chicane.
I was going to pass him if he didn't cut the chicane.
But Verne would retire with suspension problems, meaning Sebastian Buemi would take victory in the third round of the Formula E Championship.
Oui, bravo Seb, super de course, les deux derniers tours étaient très chauds.
De Grassi still leads the championship, but it was victory for Buemi in Uruguay.
Another nail-biting race. And what a debut performance from Jean-Eric Verne. Just such an unlucky ending. Congratulations to Sebastian Buemi though. Next, our attentions turned to a passion-fueled Buenos Aires in Argentina for round 4, where Formula E kicked off 2015 in pure style.
So the Buenos Aires E-Prix took place on the 10th of January in the wonderful city, the capital city of Argentina. The fans were out in force, thousands of them flocking to see the EJ, but also to see the Formula E cars get ready to take to the grid. At the start of the race, it was a great start from Nick Heidfeld. He was on the outside from third on the grid on the run down to turn 1. But look at him here, going around the outside. He even got a bit of a tap there, I think, from Alguersuari. Buemi, it was, leading the race and looking reasonably comfortable. But Lucas de Grassi in 5th place was the man who was on a mission, as Alain Prost watched on nervously. And then we had some great scraps going on as Sam Bird attacked Nick Heidfeld. Heidfeld had gone wide at the previous corner, and that allowed Antonio Felix da Costa to try and attack as well. Karun Chandok had a suspension problem which put him out of the race. Sebastian Buemi clipped the wall and sent himself out of the Grand Prix, to the delight of the Apps team, because that meant that Lucas de Grassi was then in the lead of the race. Buemi knew that the mistake had cost him. But it wasn't all happy for the Apps team, because then de Grassi had a suspension problem, causing him out of the race as well. A pretty hefty impact with the wall, and the Brazilian and championship leader was forced out of the E-Prix. Daniel Abt trying to pass Nico Prost, misjudged it and took out Jaime Alguersuari and broke his front right suspension as well. But Nick Heidfeld was then in the lead of the race, but in his second car his pit lane limiter wasn't turned on, so he had to serve a drive-through penalty. In the final laps it all got a bit argy-bargy as Jean-Eric Verne tried to force his way past Bruno Senna, wasn't quite able to, but Antonio Felix da Costa took the checkered flag to take victory in Buenos Aires for himself and the delighted Amlin Aguri team. A wonderful performance from them, and that moves them up into championship contention. De Grassi still leads the championship, but it's da Costa who's on top in Argentina.
What a race. That was a huge win for Amlin Aguri. I don't think I've ever seen a bigger grin on Antonio Felix da Costa, but it was very much well deserved. Now, so far, Formula E has brought us some stunning locations, some pretty good characters, and plenty of white knuckle racing from the first corner to the final lap. Now, make sure you stay tuned as we bring you plenty more electrifying action as we head to Miami on March the 14th for the much anticipated round 5. Also, remember, please click the subscribe button below and we'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and you won't miss out on any of the action.